folks. It's your buddy Mike Messier. I'm here with my pal Ian Patrick Gagnon. He's from Tampa, Florida. Tonight, we are pro wrestling fans, and unfortunately, there is a really sad situation going on with pro wrestling that we're going to discuss tonight. It's the 67 pages of treachery, depravity, sickness, accusations. Ian, Patrick Gagnon, I did discover that this is actually what they call a complaint.
Yeah,
And first of all, how are you doing tonight, buddy?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing great. I read the whole thing today and I thought I had a pretty good idea of everything that happened, but there was even new stuff in there today that I was just like, wow, wow. So it's bad. It's bad. But I'm doing good.
Good. And several years ago, I think it's going back 3 or 4 years ago, we did a nice broadcast together on the Ultimate Warrior. So if people are looking for more of Gonzo here on One Pro Wrestling and Sports Fan channel, go back to our Ultimate Warrior video. It's right on the Pro Wrestling Rants for Pro Wrestling Fans playlist. But let's get to the matter of hand, buddy. I mean, this is just, I read it over the last couple of days. And today, in preparation for doing this with you tonight, I watched, more stuff basically. Like the Bret Hart had some things to say.
Yeah.
Kevin Nash got in some heat yesterday online because of his statements.
hmm
Um, who Paul London, who I'm actually friendly with. Paul London's a great guy who had maybe a 3 or 4 year career with WWE as a tag team champion with Brian Kendrick on SmackDown, and he dated Ashley Mazzaro, and she ended up dying young with a really horrible situation that is now kind of resurfacing because of Janelle Grant case. Um, and so this is just knee deep into some pretty treacherous waters. Unfortunately, as pro wrestling fans, we're used to a lot of our heroes dying young. Gonzo and I probably share Rick Rude, Kurt Hennig, Ultimate Warrior, of course, guys that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
were fans of. But now this, uh, what do you think, Gonzo? What's your opening thoughts, buddy?
Well, the first thing I'm going to say is that when I heard about it initially, when I first heard about it, like the day of, um, I wasn't surprised that something like this was happening with Vince McMahon because there's a 40 plus year history of a pattern of behavior with him that he was drunk with power. He thought he owned the world. He thought he owned women, obviously, all different kinds of allegations throughout the years with women. So, when I first heard about it, I wasn't surprised. But then when I actually heard the details and started like reading some of the texts that were in there and some of the just different things that were in the complaint, I was pretty shocked by that in a lot of ways. Like just some of the stuff in there, I just really, it's hard to even imagine that somebody could do that to somebody else. Like I just can't even wrap my mind around doing something like that to somebody else. So it's like, you're not I wouldn't think about something like that. You know what I mean? And just hearing some of the stuff in there, I was just like, oh my God. Um, but yeah, it's crazy. And, like when I was reading through the lawsuit today, I kind of just marked out some different things that I thought were interesting from the beginning of it. And, it says on here, on or about March 23rd, 2019, Miss Grant arrived for a meeting in McMahon's condo with additional printed copies of her resume, a black notepad, and thank you cookies. You know what I mean? I just thought about that and I'm like, wow, dude, like for it to start that way, pretty much. And then what
Right.
goes on throughout this whole thing, it's just like, wow, dude, wow. What did
Let
you
me.
think about it?
Well,
Like when you first heard?
when I first heard, my initial thought, Gonzo, was, well, we've been here before, and it wasn't even that long ago. It was 2 years ago, summer of 2022, and it kind of Vince was playing in and out with the WWE, and they announced his, sudden retirement, and then the next thing you know, 2 or 3 weeks later, he makes a special appearance.
hmm
And so initially it was kind of like, okay, what's different this time than last time? And I think, as you alluded to, it's the details. It's now there's actually, for anyone holding on to the theory that Vince McMahon is an American hero, we've got 67 pages of a complaint that would say otherwise. And I say that because, I have friends that really put Vince McMahon on a pedestal. I don't know if at this minute they still do, But to be honest with you, Gonzo, look, I've watched WWE since I was in the fourth grade. 8 or 9 years old. I've been to many, many WWF, WWE shows in person. I've paid for a lot of pay-per-views. I went so far as to apply to the company, basically 3 times, and finally had a job interview for the creative writing team in 2007. I've gone to NXT shows. I've supported the company. The company's been a big part of my life. Pro wrestling in general. I like to think of myself as a pro wrestling fan first, not just a WWE fan, but WWE is a huge part of that. And it's disappointing and it's sick. And then when I would further answer your question, I listened to Brian Alvarez. I think is pretty level-headed, and I of the wrestling talking heads, I think Alvarez has a fairly decent perspective. And listening to him kind of tell this stuff, but also he's not giving details because he doesn't want to demonetize his YouTube channel, right?
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
just so you know, I'm already not monetized right now on this channel, so we can say whatever we want. So I'm not. But my point is, listening to some of the initial talking heads kind of dance around the taboo nature of these accusations, I wasn't really sinking it in how bad it was until I read the papers. And I want to finish with this. When I was reading the papers, I had to read it in like two increments, right? I couldn't get
Hmm.
through it in one sitting. It was too murky and disgusting. And I, looking at the first couple of pages, it's double spaced. You think it's going to be a quick read. Well, it's not. Um, and I took notes as well. But at the end of it, I was actually in the company of a friend of mine who's not big on pop culture and stuff like that. And I was explaining to him what's going on here, and this was the first he heard of it. And my friend, not looking at the papers, I'm reading to him the parts that I feel comfortable even speaking out loud. My friend says, "Well, it sounds like he was just with his girlfriend. It's just him and his girlfriend." And I said, That's not really the case. You have to really read the documents." And I would say that if you're going to have an opinion on this stuff, and that's why you and I basically forced each other to read this whole 67-page thing, if you're going to have an educated opinion, you have to do the diligence of at least reading it. And, I hate to call him out because Kevin Nash, I've worked with him in movies. He's a great guy. Kevin Nash, I think, got into a little bit of heat yesterday, or a lot of heat, because he was very vocal with his opinion, but he didn't read the documents first. He
Hmm.
basically went with his opinion based on his personal relationship with Vince McMahon. Vince McMahon put the WWF title belt on him in 1994. His relationship with Triple H, they're in the clique, they're best buds.
Hmm.
So Kevin, as much as I respect him as a great actor, a great person, a great wrestler, I think he misstepped there because I think unless you read the 67 pages, you really don't have the right to spew off an opinion because the 67 pages are not under lock and key. Anybody right now can Google it and find it. It's right there for all of us. So
Yeah, I mean, I heard what he. I was actually like waiting for the Click This episode to come out because I wanted to hear his perspective on it because, like, of all the talking heads in wrestling, like he's one of the guys that I put like really top tier. He's a really smart guy and he has like a great mind for the business and he's just level headed as far as I can tell and as far as I've always heard. And when I was just disappointed when I heard his take on it, but then I also like have to give him the benefit of the doubt because I feel like they recorded that right shortly after all this stuff came out. And he even said in the podcast, I read the first couple pages of this thing. So to me, that made me think like, okay, he read the first couple pages and then just like stopped reading it probably. And, he obviously Vince McMahon changed his life forever when he put the belt on him in 1994 and, gave him a push and believed in him. And I could see how it would be hard for him to accept that. He even said on it like I don't want to believe it's true and this and that. But I mean, overall, I was really disappointed in his take on it because he definitely was defending Vince McMahon, and I don't think that there's any way to defend this stuff. There's just no way to defend this stuff, and it's really hard to defend a guy that has 40 plus years of a litany of allegations and all different kinds of stuff against women, particularly. And then, this comes out and it's like, at least some of it's true. Even if you want to stick up for the guy, at least some of the stuff is true. And the thing is, too, is, he tried to downplay like her lawyer, but I did a
Right.
little bit of research on her lawyer, and her lawyer was a judge for, I think, like 18 years. And she was a chief judge in her district, I think, for like 12 years. Pretty sure those might be off by a couple of years, but, you know, she was a very well respected attorney. And there's no way that you bring a case like this if you don't have a bunch of fucking smoking guns and a whole lot of like really good evidence. And I'm sure you watched Stephen P. New. He said the same thing. You aren't going to bring a case like this unless you have rock solid evidence. And reading this, all the details, the dates, like everything, you know, I can picture Vince McMahon behaving this way. Once you read through this thing, I can picture him behaving this way, you know, and not everything. I can't picture everything, but just I can imagine him behaving in that kind of way where he would degrade a female, and more particularly in this case, take advantage of her and groom her. Because I mean, this is like serious grooming behavior in this thing, that and it just plays out like builds up and builds up and builds up, and I just all the details of this, the naming of the fucking toys after WWE wrestlers, that fucking blew my mind. I couldn't believe that. I was just like, oh my god,
Yeah.
that's really crazy. And just some of the other stuff, it's just insane. But you know, to me, this is and there's other things too, like his lawyer Jerry McDivitt, retired right before or like right after this NDA was presented or whatever, and he retired right then after that. And there's a spot in the lawsuit where she says, is that when Jerry's going to send the papers? And it's being reported now that WWE legal department is saying we didn't know anything about these NDAs. And he was signing them on behalf of WWE. That's what is being said now. And so it just seems like everybody's turning on him. You know what I mean? Like Laurinaitis is turning on him. WWE is kind of just like, and TKO is probably, and it's weird too because you wonder how much did TKO know. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah, and the deal with Netflix, basically 2025 for Monday Night Raw, which since 1993, I think January of 1993, Monday Night Raw has been the flagship of the WWE weekly programming on USA Network for the most part. I think they were on TNN for 2 or 3 years, and then they went right back to USA. So they sold the rights. They went over to Netflix for a whole lot of money. Is it 500 million? Do I even have that right? But it was a
Five
whole lot of money.
5 billion
Five
over
five billion.
10 years. So it's 500
Five
million a year.
right. So 5 billion a year for 10 years, and then I think
No,
the
no,
next day
5 billion for the 10 years. It's 500 million per year.
yes, yeah, yeah, I got you.
Okay, all
So
right, got it.
so so they and I believe they're all saying that Vince was a big part of that deal. It did seem like in the last couple of years with these things kind of probably mounting underneath the surface, Vince was adamant about let's hurry up and sell this thing. Like because 10 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, we never heard of WWE looking to sell. And suddenly that's become a thing in the last 2 or 3 years. And then the eventual, merger slash sale, whatever you want to call it, with TKO and UFC. I do want to clarify because Gonzo, even I saw a video with a lawyer talking about this case today as well, and he was
Hmm.
the lawyer. It wasn't Stephen P. New; it was another guy who did a video on this, but he was misusing the term lawsuit. Right now, there's not a lawsuit, but this is it. It's likely to go there. So let me just read this clarification because I actually looked it up. I believe this is from Merriam Dictionary. This is the difference between a complaint and a lawsuit. A complaint about using lawsuit for complaint. That's the title of the article. The complaint comes first, the suit follows. Now, we might just be simple, down to earth dictionary folk from Massachusetts, but we like to think we know a thing or two about words and how they work. and we couldn't help but notice a lawsuit and complaint are sometimes misused in the media and journalism. By definition, lawsuit refers to the legal process, that is, the court case, by which a court of law makes a decision on an alleged wrong, whereas complaint refers to the initial document or pleading submitted by a plaintiff against a defendant that details how the plaintiff's legal rights were violated in some way and sets forth the plaintiff's demand for relief, monetary or otherwise. In other words, complaint refers to the set of papers, the 67 pages. So I'm jumping in now. In other words, complaint refers to the set of papers that outlines the following lawsuit. It can vary in length, and it sets the stage for the courtroom drama that is about to follow. So, just for clarification, this stack of 67 pages that I've read, you've read, Stephen P. New has read, other people, thousands, millions of other people have probably read it by now. This is the complaint. If they go to a civil case, that would be the lawsuit. I just wanted to clarify. Go ahead.
Yeah, that's I'm glad you clarified that too, just because I didn't necessarily understand that either until I looked it up just like you did. Um,
Right.
but I think that every lawyer that I've heard speak about it, Stephen P. New said in the first video that they did about it, he said it was a 67-page legal masterpiece because of how much detail was in it. And then I watched this other guy who's one of the big lawyers on YouTube that has a lot of views and everything, and he said like this basically the same thing. This thing is like so rock solid, just the 67 pages, and it's on point, all the detail, all the information, and um, I just can't imagine that uh, a lot of this would be not true. I feel like probably 90% of this, if not 100%, is true. And that's just like what my gut tells me. You know, and
Well,
go ahead.
there's a point that Bret Hart has jumped in on, and
Hmm.
there's been and Meltzer reported that Bret said this, and Bret did say it basically that the style of texting that's exhibited in the complaint of the word your, spelled with a U and an R,
Hmm.
and like the word you in these texts spelled with just a U, a capital U, and the overuse of exclamation points and the rapid misspelling. Basically, Brett has said that really seems like Vince McMahon's style of text. And
Wow, I didn't hear that.
yeah, so and to tell you the truth, I've heard kind of off the record, but here we are. Another wrestler has kind of said, under the surface, not on the record, that these are very similar to Vince McMahon texts. Like this
Wow.
looks like Vince McMahon text. So Brett's on the record with this, that these texts look like, it's kind of like when you see a Ric Flair tweet. Like every letter, the first letter of every word in a Ric Flair tweet is capitalized, and the rest of the
Yeah.
word is not. So it's a very distinctive thing that some of these old elder statesmen have a hard time with their writing. But in any event, I want to get to point 8 because I made some notes too.
Yep.
And in point 8, I'll just read it for everybody. This is on page 2. McMahon warned Miss Grant to keep their, quote, closeness, quote, secret, lest rumors lead to public trouble, and added that while he protects loyal people, he had world-class he had world-class legal resources on speed dial to deal with people who became a problem. I'll read that again since I botched it. McMahon warned Miss Grant to keep their closeness secret, lest rumors lead to public trouble, and added that while he protects loyal people, he had world-class legal resources on speed dial to deal with people who became a problem. So let me ask you real quick: when you hear that couple of sentences, who do you think of, Gonzo?
I mean, well, aside from Vince, you mean?
Who are the people? Well, who are the people that has who have become a problem for Vince that he's had world class legal resources deal with.
Well, women in the past, I know that, but
Yep.
there's is that what you're getting at, or is there something else?
There's something else. What I'm getting at is basically the names that came to my mind are Ryback and CM Punk. And now that I think
Oh,
about
okay.
it, Martha Hart, because if you think about before this, the biggest court cases Vince has been in was with the federal government on the steroid case. We had before that there was the Ring Boy trial of '92. I believe the lady's name was Rita Chatteron, who
Hmm.
was a referee, the first actual female WWE referee or WWF referee, going back to '85 or '86. She accused Vince of rape, and so that's a person. But even Ryback has been rallying against uh,
Oh yeah,
Vince McMahon, not for this stuff, but for like the use of his name and for the way that he was dealt with in the company. CM Punk,
yeah.
I believe that the WWE physical trainer was the one to actually sue CM Punk for um, mis talking about libel, I guess, on him going to CM Punk's podcast with his friend Colt Cabana when they were talking about the Royal Rumble and the injury and all
Hmm.
that stuff. It actually, I mean, in my mind, CM Punk should have been suing them, right? But the point is, this kind of threats that we get in part 8, that sounds like a Vince McMahon power play. Lest rumors lead to public trouble, and added that while he protects loyal people, and if you look at Vince, he's had some, the late Pat Patterson was with him for years, Rene Gallet, Tony Gurria. I'm not putting these guys in the same category as this case, by the way. I'm just saying that these people have always had jobs with Vince. Jay Strongbow, Lou Albano was kept around because Vince's father was loyal to Lou Albano. He had world class legal resources on speed dial, makes you think of McDivitt, to deal with people who became a problem. And when I think of people who became a problem for Vince, I think of CM Punk, Ryback, Martha Hart, Lisa Marie, the referee, and so on and so forth.
Yeah. I mean, that that's definitely the crazy part about this whole thing is that you just see the pattern um, with Vince always being litigious throughout the years when he fought the government in the steroid trial, all these other things, Ring Boy scandal, and as one of the points that I wanted to bring up too uh, was that he says it's on page 1155 at the end of like one of their first meetings. He told Miss Grant that he didn't want to just give her a job, but give her a life, and that he would find a place for her at WWE. Um, so you can tell that right from the beginning, this was a long play. Like he was playing a long game because building up to this I feel like this is almost to the point where he starts to get sexual with her or whatever. So that's in a couple pages probably, but there's that, and then a little further down, he asked her about if her cell was the best number to reach her, and he shared his personal phone number with Miss Grant, and then walked her to his door, and again hugged her while whispering, "So good." So and I hear that, and I'm like, dude, I could see Vince doing that. The craziest thing to me about this whole thing, that's like I just find to be the most interesting part, is, and it's like a twofold thing. The first part is like the way that reality is imitating art right now, because all those storylines that he did, wanted to do an incest angle with Stephanie. He was pimping out Stephanie at one point to his business associates. He had, the Trish Stratus thing, making her bark like a dog and strip down and all this other stuff. And throughout the years, he did all kinds of stuff like that that degraded women and exerted power over them in storylines. And now all this stuff is coming out in this lawsuit. It's like that's like kind of you could picture the guy on TV doing that, and then you think about it, and it's like, well, obviously the guy that we saw on TV and all those storylines weren't that far off from reality. Like those came from reality of his life. And so like I think that the there's a possibility that with all the information that's probably going to come out, that this may not even be the worst of it. I honestly believe that. Like, as horrible and disgusting and fucking depraved as this whole thing is, I feel like there's a possibility this may not even be the worst of it. You know, you heard that her lawyer said there's been people calling up her office like crazy. You know, previous people wanting to come forward and speak and alleged previous victims and stuff. And then you consider, you know, the SEC was already investigating them, but then the feds raided his house, and I read an article somewhere that says they seized his phone and they seized like other electronics when they raided his house. That was like last summer, you
Right.
know, and now the feds are investigating this too on top of whatever they were already investigating, which obviously is believed to be more about the other sexual allegations and the other money that he paid out. So, I mean, anybody with half a brain can see the pattern, you know, and so going back to what I originally said, I find it hard to believe that any more than like 5 to 10% of this could be false, and I'm not even sure that much would be. And a lot of people are saying like, oh, why didn't she stop? Why didn't she leave? Why, you know, if you didn't read the 67 pages of it, then that's what you need to do first. And then if you do read the 67 pages and you can't see how, like, because the thing was also her age. But now I'm hearing, like, I thought she was in her early 20s. Now I'm hearing that she definitely was like 38 or 39 and she's like now in her 40s. I don't know. It's been kind of a mystery to me, like what her age really is, but it seems like it's starting to be like solid that she was older or whatever. But even if she was older, like what it lays out here that her parents died, bankruptcy, lost the family house, she was caregiving for her parents. She needed a job, obviously, and she was in a vulnerable place. And it's so obvious that Vince McMahon could have taken advantage of her. When you see the picture of the girl, it's like, you know, she just looks like, I hate to say that, but she just looks like he's somebody that he could take advantage of, and he obviously did. And you know, people, why didn't she leave? Like, he's a billionaire. It's Vincent Kennedy McMahon. You know what I mean? He could destroy your life. You know, so I just think it's crazy. People can't understand how this happened, and it's like it probably started out as a sugar daddy thing. You know what I mean? Or
Right.
what seemed to be like a sugar daddy thing. But
Well, let me jump in.
obviously,
Let me
yeah,
this and I want to address a couple of viewers, the Tribal Chief and Jason Solomonster. I don't know if that's the same Solomonster podcaster that I listen to because these comments don't seem like him, but maybe he's a Solomonster fan or something. Because I do listen to Solomonster's podcasts on a quite regular basis. And then the Tribal Chief and himself are kind of in the same uh, camp. So I'm going to address what they're saying because it's worthy to talk about. And look, folks, this is just the public opinion court. This is not the real court. The court of law will determine this one way or the other. Stephen P. News seems to think he gave Vince a 50-50 chance of serving jail time, which I thought was pretty high because as far as I know about these investigations, but there's been no criminal case or criminal complaint filed as of yet. Right now, it's just this complaint. So we'll see where it goes. There's also quite a possibility, and this is what Stephen P. New was saying, and other people have said this as well, Gonzo, and for the guys that are watching. Vince McMahon had an agreement, a legal agreement with this Janelle Grant. He was supposed to pay $3 million. He paid the first installment of $1 million, and he didn't pay the second installment. So Vince McMahon, as we know from pro wrestling, and I believe Meltzer said this, Dave Meltzer said this, when people sign a contract with Vince McMahon, he 100% expects the other person to live up to that contract. But he doesn't expect to have to live up to his side of the contract. And we can cite the Bret Hart case. I mean, people love to shit on Bret Hart and say that he wouldn't do a job to Shawn Michaels, but the reality is Vince McMahon, if he honored the 20-year contract that he put Bret Hart under, he wouldn't have been in that situation now, would he? So Vince doesn't like to honor contracts, but he expects other people to do so. So if Vince had some, common sense, or if his advisors had some common sense, once they reached that NDA agreement with this lady, Janelle Grant, he would have paid her off. And he didn't pay her off. He stopped paying. And if you remember, Gonzo, 2 years ago, there wasn't just one NDA that we heard about. We heard about several. We heard that there was more than one. So that's why when this attorney for this lady Janelle Grant comes out and says that there's other people calling her and stuff, we have to wonder if some of these other people that had NDAs signed with Vince, when are they going to come out of the woodwork? How many of them have been paid like they were supposed to be paid? Now, I'm not saying, and I said this 2 years ago, I said this in the Facebook groups, I said this in videos. If you've got to pay people to not talk about what you've done with them behind closed doors, like you have to pay people to keep their mouths shut, I would suggest that you've done something wrong to these people. If you and I,
Yeah.
Gonzo, have a tiff over $10, or if I date your cousin and she doesn't like me, I'm not paying her $1 million just to say Mike Messier is a bad date, or paying you $1 million to say, Mike Messier doesn't pay the $10 bet we had on the football game. If you've got to pay someone $1 million or $100,000 or whatever to not talk about things that happen between the two of you, I would suggest that there's something wrong there. A lot of wrestling fans, especially Gonzo, and maybe the Tribal Chief and Solomonster can take this to heart, or Jason Solomonster here, a lot of wrestling fans will look for any reason to defend Vince because it justifies their own fanhood of his product. I've been quite open in saying that I'm addicted to pro wrestling. It's an addiction. It's hard to stop watching. I've been able to get away from the weekly Raws as well as the weekly SmackDowns as well as the weekly Dynamites, and now basically I watch the premium live events for the WWE, the pay-per-views of AEW in the movie theater, and I go to these NXT house shows here in Florida, like I went to Daly's Place during the pandemic in Jacksonville. But for me, my fanhood has gone from the 13-year-old kid who was watching every single wrestling show on television every week and taping with VHSs and studying the Barry Windham Bam Bam Bigelow Starrcade 88 match, 10 times during the week. Now I'm more discerning with my fanhood. And now I can at least say, hey, look, if I'm addicted to this stuff and millions of other people are addicted to this fantasy world that we all share, can we at least acknowledge that some of the people behind the scenes are not quality human beings? Can we at least say that, hey, look, they make a very entertaining product, whether it's the Attitude Era, whether it's the Bob Backlund era, the Bruno Sammartino era, but even though the product might be greatly entertaining with these stories of good versus bad and cliques and factions and tag teams coming and going and people fighting for valets and managers and all the great storylines that we enjoy, can we at least have the common decency to say that some of these people are scumbags behind the scenes?
I mean, yeah, everybody should be able to do that, because I mean, look, Dark Side of the Ring is on season 5 now or something. That should tell you something right there. All like those are all negative stories about wrestling that involve, scandals or somebody dying or somebody being a total piece of shit, you know? And I mean, it's no secret that wrestling has always been like this bizarre business, with all these weird things that go on, and it's like an underbelly that you don't know unless you kind of dig into it, like how we are grew up as fans and we're interested in the business and everything, so we know things that are a little bit deeper than what somebody else might know because they don't look into it, and it's just one of those weird things where like the line of reality is blurred so much, and I feel like this lawsuit right here is like a perfect example of how the line with reality and what's fiction and what's not is like blurred with wrestling. And sometimes you don't know if life is imitating art or art is imitating life, you know? And to me, that's just crazy. That's just crazy that, all this stuff has happened for so many years, like you said, with all different kinds of stories, the Jimmy Snuka story, not to mention like it was 40 something or 50 something wrestlers died under the age of 40 in like a 10-year span, like all people that we grew up with, and that just to me says something about the way this business is. and the way that probably a lot of really bad things have happened that people don't know about, things that just get swept under the rug, you know? And I just think that, like I said, I think this is just the beginning of it, you know? I think that this is probably going to blow up even bigger and bigger and bigger with all the new stuff that's going to happen, new people coming forward. And, it's just crazy. And uh, one of the other things that I wanted to bring up too about the beginning of this is that some of these texts in here, there's one on page 12 where she had commented on that famous T-Rex skull on it's
Right.
point 663. She commented on that big T-Rex skull in his office, which everybody would that pays attention knows that that's in his office. And then he says, text her BTW. If you're a bad girl, the T-Rex will eat you. Followed by seriously, Janelle, wherever you land in WWE, you will be a credit to the organization. Who the fuck says that? Who says if you're a bad girl, the T Rex is going to eat you? And then, like, out of the other side of their mouth, quote unquote, seriously, wherever you land in WWE, you'll be a credit to the organization. To me, that just so points to the manipulation that was in this. And going back to your point, is you said he paid her the $1 million and then he's supposed to pay installments of 500,000. He doesn't pay her the second time, right? So obviously that right there, she's completely within her right to want money from him or whatever because he didn't live up to the agreement that he basically pressured her to sign. But going back to what you said, I think that he thought he could just get away with it. He thought that this girl would. She got $1 million. She's not going to fucking do anything. She knows I'll destroy her, and she actually had the courage to come forward, and get a lawyer and really, have a serious complaint. That's 67 pages that they took their time with this, obviously. So to me, all of those things just point to, like I said, 90% of this I think is true.
Let
you
me
know?
let me get let me get to some of these comments, and I appreciate
Mhm.
the guys. I'm not sure if this is the actual Husey. Hello, because I do listen to his podcast too. He's done some good stuff with Conan. If this is the actual guy, if it's a fan, that's fine too. Thanks for being here, guys. The Jason Solomonster account says, I think honestly, the most aha moment was when Janelle asked Johnny Ace, has Vince done this before while she was about to get gang banged by Johnny and Vince in Titan Tower? Let me address that because that comes later in this thing where they're talking about a basic, you can call it a menage a trois, but the way it's described in here, at least, it sounds like a forced menage a trois, like basically a
Well,
forced gangbang.
that's two separate incidents. Wait, like he's blending together two separate incidents because the first one that he's talking about when she asked Johnny Ace, has Vince ever brought a girl like this before, was the first time when Vince brought her to brought Johnny Ace and her to the condo. But then
Right.
the second part was they basically raped her in the office. She said at Titan Tower. So it's two separate things. But yeah, it's crazy because she asked him that, and he just looked at Vince, and then Vince like grabbed her and just started whatever, started doing whatever. So yeah, you keep going with the comments. So I just wanted to point that out.
No, and here's the thing, guys. I consider some of the comments gallows humor, and I have that same sense of humor, guys. Trust me. Like when things are so depraved and sick and out there, sometimes you just have to crack a dirty joke just to deal with it. So, and some of these comments, if people are reading these stuff, they might think that we're all a bunch of lunatics. But the reality is, this is how we deal with stuff. As wrestling fans, I mean, talk about Gino Hernandez getting shot in the head, uh, Chris
Dino
Adams
Bravo.
dying. Dino Bravo getting a shot for cigarettes, and
Yeah.
and I mean, if you hear, I mean, the one that kind of screws with me is the recent rumors of how Rick Rude might have died. I mean, so anyway, but to get to some of the guys' points on a serious note, guys, because I do take that point seriously. Is this all a setup? Is she lying? Why didn't she go to the police earlier? I wrote that comment down in between point 77 and 78. So I'll read this to you guys just to take the point that I've considered some of what you're saying as well. Okay. Page 15, point 77, paragraph 77. When Miss Grant tried to make small talk about WWE's TV storylines, McMahon suggested she watch the next episode of Monday Night Raw and text him before the broadcast. After she agreed, he forcibly kissed her and began pulling down a strap on her sweater. Miss Grant then sat up, said she needed to leave, and had a lot to process and left. And so that's when, gentlemen, I wrote in my notes, why not cut off or report? So I'm wondering myself at that point, why, if she felt like she was being kissed and her bra strap is being pulled down, or her sweater strap is being pulled down, I guess, without her consent or without her enjoying that, why did she not cut off the situation? And I think Gonzo answered that earlier, and this report does a good job of painting the picture of a woman whose parents had passed away. She was the sole caretaker for her elderly parents. She's about 38 years old at this point. That's according to Stephen P. New. He's saying she's about 38 or 40 when all this stuff is going on, and that she wasn't in a financial situation where she could just go to her day job. She didn't have a day job, apparently. Apparently, she put a lot of eggs in the basket of working for WWE, and she was not a wrestling fan. She was someone who lived in the same building that Vince had this penthouse in, because he was living apart from Linda. One thing that came to my mind, Gonzo, many times reading this stuff, and it has for years, why are Vince and Linda still married? I guess the answer is money. Kind of like, why are the Clintons still married? It's because it's kind of an old school mentality. Like, look, folks, Trump was married and divorced. He's been divorced twice, and I think he's on his third wife, if not his fourth. But he became president with his third or fourth wife, and people don't hold that against him, or at least a lot of people don't. Why does Vince think that he needs to keep this 1952 type of thinking where you have to stay married? If you're not happy, get divorced. I mean, during the Attitude Era, when he's sticking his tongue down Tori Wilson's throat and Stacy Keebler's throat, obviously he was enjoying that performance. So why stay married? And no offense to Linda, but if you're the genetic jackhammer that Vince claimed to be, why would you stick with this lady that doesn't do it for you?
I mean, I think that there's probably a couple of reasons for that. One, I would say it's an ego thing because, and I heard somebody else kind of make this point, and I was like, that really makes sense. Is that if they get divorced or she divorces him, right? Because he probably wouldn't divorce her. She would probably divorce him. If she divorces him, that makes him look inadequate, like he was inadequate for her. And he can't
Right.
take that in his ego. Like his ego couldn't take that. So I think that that's part of it. But I think the big part of it, that's a little part. The big part is money, business. You know what I mean? Like that they're gonna have to split things if they get divorced. Whereas like she was probably dating somebody or doing her own thing. He was doing his own thing, but obviously what he was doing was not good. So I feel like it's just all came down to money and business and the ego.
Let me address a couple of questions here. Golf franchise makes a solid point, but just to clarify, how did both her parents die at the same time? She said she was a caregiver or something. Did she kill them? Well, and I'm going to take it as a serious question, because they didn't
Yeah,
die at the exact same day or the exact same moment. As far as we can tell, they weren't in a car accident together. They were probably around the same age. They probably had similar health situations. If you think about it, if you're in a couple, and that's a couple that's been together for a long time, you've probably ate the same type of food. You probably had the same exercise level. And you probably, a lot of times they say that when one elder spouse dies, the other one has a broken heart and takes
yeah.
less care of themselves. So I'm giving a serious answer because I do take that as a serious question. And Pack, who was nice enough to ask about the super chat, and Pack, if you can do a super chat, I appreciate that. If you really want to help out your buddy Mike Messier, go to MikeMessier.com, scroll to the bottom of the page, and pick up a copy of one of my books, because at least you'll get something out of it. And I do appreciate that. Fighter Play Basketball is a great novel. My Gothic Horror, Distance from Avalon. Let's get to your question, or your statement, actually. Your grandparents did the same. And what he's referring to is that his grandparents, passed away around the same time. And here's a little bit of levity for everybody. An elderly couple goes to a divorce lawyer. They sit down at his desk and they say, divorce lawyer Johnson, we want to get divorced. And the divorce lawyer looks at the two of them, and they appear to be like deep into their 80s, if not their 90s. And he says, well, my goodness, how long have you two been married? And they say, we've been married for 65 years. And he says, oh, my goodness. Well, how long have you wanted to get divorced from each other? And they say, we've wanted to be divorced from each other for 35 years. And he says, 35 years you wanted to get divorced? Why didn't you come to me sooner? And they say, we wanted to wait until the grandchildren were dead.
That's funny. That's
Yeah.
funny.
So thanks. So that's a
I
little bit of
mean,
levity.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's very true though. About like my same thing happened with my grandparents within the last year. My grandfather died. My grandmother was not, really sad and all that sort of stuff, and she died not long after. So you have to, and we don't have any details about, her parents. It only just says that they both died. But you would have to imagine that they were probably both around the same age, all the stuff that you said. Um, and the thing is too is like if all this stuff is in the lawsuit, obviously they're going to be able to prove it one way or another. Like things
The,
like
the,
that, at least.
the complaint.
You
The
know,
complaint.
sorry, the complaint. Things like that, if her parents died or not, or if there was a bankruptcy, they're going to be able to prove that stuff easy. It's the same thing with the text. You're not going to put fake text messages in here. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, I think that a lot of this stuff is just definitely not fabricated in any way. You know what I mean? Like it's this stuff is too rock solid and it paints too much of a realistic picture of how this thing went from point A to point Z. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Let me get to some of the topics here. Wouldn't Linda McMahon get the Linda Hogan settlement if she and Vince got divorced? She'd get everything or nearly. Well, here's the thing, Husey. Hello, I love that. That's his catchphrase. Basically, if Linda got 80% of $1 billion, what does that leave Vince with? 200 million or whatever the math is? You see what my point? Like Vince, regardless, has enough money. Even if Linda took 80, which I don't think she would get that much. I mean, but whatever she took, I think Vince McMahon would still have enough money to live. He's what is he, 76 years old? So I mean, if he lives
yeah,
to 100, he's got
78.
20. Right. So I mean, how many Lear jets can you have? The other thing, now that I'm going to answer my other question from before, why haven't these two gotten divorced? Maybe the term would be, does Linda know where the bodies are buried? Like, does Linda know too much so that Vince doesn't want to get divorced? But once again, I think it's like that old school 1950s mentality of don't get divorced. And like I said, I'm citing the Clintons among other couples. Here's a little golf franchises and speculating that they might have both gotten the vaccine. And hey, look, anything
Huh?
goes here, guys. I mean, I'm not going to dispute that. I'll be honest. I've gotten the vaccine. I've gotten of the other the what do you call it? The updates,
Boosters.
the boosters, and I'm no, I'm fine. I'm fine. Yeah, but
Oh no.
but anyway, I think that there's something there. Maybe for a future podcast we talk about that because a lot of guys, sports guys especially, are fighting on the field and everything. So I'm not gonna totally discount that thought either. Vincent Kennedy McMahon's behavior is concerning if he has a cult leader vibe in the office. And Paul London was comparing Vince to the Nexion guy. His behavior should be analyzed. And I've said this, Hughley, for years. I've said that Vince, to me, did have a traumatic childhood. In the Playboy interview from, I think, 98, 99, Vince basically alluded to being sexually molested as a boy from a man, not from a woman. And I believe that took place in North Carolina, where Vince was being raised at the time by his mother and his stepfather. And I don't think that Vince pinpointed anybody in particular as the molester, but he just basically referenced it. And I think there's a Scott Hall clip on YouShoot where Scott Hall's talking about how Vince McMahon told him about being molested. And in the same conversation of, I want you to go out there and work with Dustin Rhodes as Gold Dust. So I mean, we see how Vince's mind operates, and I have a theory, folks, that for the last 30 or 40 years, however you've watched WWE, we're all kind of enjoying the diary of a madman. We're all kind of
Yeah.
enjoying the way that a person who's been the victim of abuse has probably not gotten therapy, but he's dealt with the trauma that he had by giving us wrestling. And a lot of times that's highly entertaining. But there's been for quite some time these elements of sickness. And to Tribal Chief's point from earlier, I didn't forget about these earlier points. Let's not forget about the great years of wrestling that Vince brought us. Hey, I went to see Hulk Hogan versus King Kong Bundy Saturday night's main event, December of '87, guys. I mean, I've been with this thing for a long time. So I saw, Hulk Hogan body slam Big John Studd and win by countout at the Capitol Center. That's a wrestling venue that's not even around anymore. It got destroyed in like '97. I've been through a lot with the WWF. I saw the Iron Sheik defend the WWF title against Chief Jay Strongbow in a high school gym. I've been watching this stuff for quite some time. I've got a lot of emotional investment into it. Like I said, I went for a job interview for creative. And so I share this with you. And WrestleMania 17 is definitely, if not the very best WrestleMania, definitely in the top three. But anyway, I wanted to get to a couple of things, Gonzo, and I really appreciate everybody making this a lively conversation, especially Gonzo and everyone that's contributed to these comments. You guys, please check out my interview with Kevin Anton. He plays Harley Race in the Iron Claw. Have you seen that film, Gonzo?
I haven't seen it yet.
I would suggest you see it. I really enjoyed it. A lot of people took issue with the character or the real life guy of Chris Von Erich not being in the movie. I would say, you know what? None of the Von Erichs were actually Von Erichs. They were actually Atkinsons. So I mean,
Yeah.
Fritz brought us Lance Von Erich. He wasn't a Von Erich, and yes, there was an actual Chris. Chris Atkinson's not in the movie portrayed, but I made a joke that Chris Von Erich was played by John Cena in the film. So, but here's my other point, Gonzo, and it kind of goes along with what you were saying because you can't see him. That's the punchline. Okay. Okay. So here's my thing with all this. And Gonzo, you made this point several times. There's so much detail here. How could this not be all true or at least mostly true? There's so many people, WWE employee 1 through 4 or head office person 1 through 4, human resources employee number 2 in point 80, WWE corporate officer number 4 in point 81. There's so many people that are alluded to. The WWE superstar that most have deduced is Brock Lesnar because he's a former UFC heavyweight champion. There's so many other people that are named. This is the spot that Vincent Kennedy McMahon, love him or hate him or anywhere in between, finds himself in. He either goes to court to clear his name, and he might do that at age 76. Does he want to do that? Who knows? But if he does do that, all these people that are listed either as numbers or WWE superstar or however they're listed without their actual name being listed, we'd assume, but not knowing for a fact, that perhaps Kevin Dunn would be called in, who's had a real long relationship with Vince. All these
Pritchard.
people that Bruce Pritchard, Brother Love, and that goes to Conrad Thompson because he's still doing his podcast with Bruce. All these people would have to, I would assume, testify or at least be subpoenaed for a question and answer session. Does Vince want to put his people through that? Even if he's not in power anymore, even who knows? Maybe he does. There's another part of me, Gonzo, that thinks maybe Vince wanted this to come to the surface. Maybe Vince is such a sadomasochist or such a weird guy. Like he wants to do the crime, but he also wants to be punished. I mean, he wants to have the kiss my ass club, but then he wants to kiss Rikishi's ass at the end of it, right? So
I mean, it's interesting.
yeah, is there some part of Vince? Look, folks, he could have him spending the $1 million for the second payment and the third million for the third payment. That's like me and you buying a Domino's pizza, right?
Yeah.
That's nothing for a guy with all that money. So why didn't he pay the money unless on some level he wanted this stuff to come out? Maybe. And I had the same feeling about Paul Heyman 20 years ago when he was doing the ECW thing. This is a guy that likes to construct, and he's a guy that likes to destruct. I'm going to build my empire, and then I'm going to take my fist and smash it down. And I think that some of these guys, Vince McMahon here in this case, are these evil geniuses that love to create, and then if they're going to die, they're going to go out and take the fucking ball with them. They're going to deflate the basketball on their way off the court.
I mean, I definitely, I think that's an interesting point. I think that Vince McMahon's ego and I think that what he wanted his legacy to be was, it seemed too important to him. I think for him to do that, and selling it to Endeavor is like, look what they've done with the UFC in less than 20 years. Well, no, they've only owned it for like less than 10 years, but in 20 years, look how much UFC's grown, especially over the last 10 years. So it's like selling it to somebody like Endeavor, that they're not going to destroy the business. So I feel like he wanted to make that sale because he knew this stuff was coming down the pipe. I think he knew that his time was running out as far as being able to get away with anything because he's this rich billionaire that has all this power over people. And I have a theory too. You said you have a theory. I have a theory too. I think that Miss Grant's main motivations in this and her main objective is not money. I think her main objective is she wants justice for what happened. And her lawyer even said that. She was coming forward first because she wanted to expose the toxic culture that was in WWE, especially with Vince McMahon and the things that he was doing. And she wanted to be the first to come out to empower other people to come out. So I think that that combined with the fact that they demanded a jury trial, even though from what I've heard, demanding a jury trial is like a tactic to try to get more money out of the settlement. But I don't believe that they're trying to settle on this. And if you look at, like, for example, P. Diddy, whatever that was, a couple months ago, with I think in 48 hours that case settled. And a lot of these cases apparently tend to settle pretty quick when it's something like this. It's already been over 2 weeks. You know what I mean? And I guess Vince McMahon only has like another 6 or 7 days to like respond to this complaint. You know, so my theory is that this is not going to settle, and I think that this is going to go to trial, and I think that this is definitely going to turn into a criminal matter because another thing that I heard from people that know about the FBI a lot better than I do is that for them to even get a search warrant to search his house like they did, they already had to have had quite a bit of evidence to even do that. And that's before this lawsuit was filed. That there's just so much I think is going to come out now that I don't think Vince McMahon's going to get away with this one. I don't.
I want to take that as being your answer to how do you think this case will play out. And we've got just about a minute left, guys. I want to thank the Tribal Chief, Golf Franchise, Hughesley, hello, Solomonster, and hey, it doesn't matter if you guys are the actual podcast guys or fans or whatever. I appreciate you guys being here. And like I said, levity is how we deal with this crazy stuff. I mean, I remember doing a podcast the night that Daphne killed herself, and it was just nice to be on there with the other wrestling fans and just process it. So let me answer the question in about 30 seconds or less. I kind of agree with Gonzo here. I can see this thing. I do believe, I could be wrong, that now that these 67 pages have been served, and Stephen P. New basically brought this up, I think they can still settle now. Like I think as far as the civil trial, even like we've been saying, Vince should have, for his sake, paid the 3 million off earlier. But I think even now, his basic choice is either pay her the 10 or 20 or 30 million, whatever she wants. Oh, that would be great television. Golf Franchise just nailed it. If this case is televised, if this is bigger than OJ. But basically, I say most likely I would think that this is going to be settled out of court for the civil and paid a lot of money. But then there's going to be all these other people with these stories. The Ashley Mazzaro thing is back, and it's going to be a big mess. So it feels like the end, but I think we're just at the beginning of this whole
Beginning
thing.
of the end. Yeah.
Right, right. The beginning of the end. It's not the. It's yeah. So, folks, I want to thank everybody for checking this out. Like I said, the Kevin Anton interviews on there. I bought the Arn Anderson comic book through Kickstarter, and the gentleman that wrote this thing is on this channel here with an interview. Thanks, guys, for watching.